So, how did the United States become, well, the most powerful country in history? You'd probably think it was all part of some grand master plan, right? But here's the thing, what if I told you it was mostly an accident? Yeah, a series of lucky breaks, totally unexpected turns, and just plain geopolitical flukes that somehow created a superpower almost by chance. Let's dive in. I mean, this quote right here, it pretty much sums up the whole story. America's rise to the top was, believe it or not, a huge surprise. For more than 100 years after Europeans first showed up, North America was basically ignored. So, how on earth did this overlooked continent become the center of global power? Well, it all started with it being the prize that nobody actually wanted. Okay, so let's set the scene. When Columbus sailed west, he wasn't trying to find a new continent, no way. He was looking for a shortcut to Asia, for the super valuable spice trade. He ends up landing in the Caribbean, and, well, he didn't find any spices, but he did find gold. And that discovery, right there, was about to shape the fate of two entire continents. So after Columbus's voyage, the two big naval powers of the day, Spain and Portugal, they literally drew a line on the map and divided up the world. Portugal got the east, which meant they controlled the insanely profitable spice routes all around Africa and Asia. Spain, they got the west, and boy, did they hit the jackpot. We're talking tons of gold and silver in Central and South America. And North America and all this, it was basically considered useless lands, the consolation prize, with no obvious riches in sight. And the start of any real settlement was, well, it was incredibly slow. The English first kind of poked around in 1497. Then the Spanish showed up looking for gold in 1539 and left completely empty-handed. The very first English colony, Roanoke, it just vanished. Poof. It took more than 100 years for the first permanent settlement at Jamestown to finally stick. For a full century, North America was just a global afterthought. But once colonies were finally up and running, that so-called useless land, suddenly it became pretty valuable. And it wasn't long before Europe's biggest rivals, Britain and France, started fighting over it. This conflict, this kind of family feud fought on a different continent, would accidentally set the stage for a brand new nation. Okay, so by the mid-1700s, the French had claimed this huge territory they called New France. But here's the catch. It was mostly empty. The entire French population was only about 60,000 people. Now, compare that to the British colonies huddled along the coast. They were home to over 1 million people. 60,000 versus over 1 million. With numbers like that, you can pretty much guess how the next war was going to turn out, right? And yeah, no surprise, the British won. They gained a massive amount of new land. But winning a war is crazy expensive. Britain was now deep in debt, and they turned to their American colonies to help pay the bills. And that was the critical turning point, a total game changer. It really created this perfect domino effect. Think about it. Step 1, Britain needs money to pay for the war. Step 2, they slap a bunch of new taxes on the colonies. Step 3, the colonists fire back with no taxation without representation. They had no vote, no say. And step 4, protests turn into conflict, and boom, suddenly you've got a war for independence. A simple disagreement over taxes had accidentally kicked off a revolution. But even after winning the war, the new United States was, well, it was a total mess. You had 13 states basically acting like 13 bickering little countries. The whole nation was failing, and fast. It was on the brink of collapse until the Founding Fathers stepped in, scrapped the whole system, and wrote a brand new constitution to create a government that could, actually govern. All right, so with a new functional government in place, the next chapter in this incredible accidental story begins. A period of just explosive and unbelievably lucky expansion across the entire continent. So, how in the world did America get so big so fast? It's a great question, and the answer is one of the luckiest, most insane real estate deals in all of history. And it was all thanks to one guy, a certain French emperor with some very, very big plans for Europe. See, Napoleon had just gotten the massive Louisiana territory back from Spain. The problem for him? He was broke and needed cash, like yesterday, to fund his wars in Europe. The U.S., meanwhile, just wanted to buy the port of New Orleans. But to their absolute shock, Napoleon comes back and says, forget the port. How about you take the whole thing for the bargain basement price of $15 million? And just like that, with a single stroke of a pen, the United States literally doubled in size. It was a complete geopolitical accident. Napoleon needed money for a war, and America just happened to be in the right place at exactly the right time. And the expansion, it didn't stop there. Over the next 50 years, it was just one thing after another. Through a mix of buying land, annexing territory, and, as one source puts it, one ugly war with Mexico, the U.S. just kept growing until it stretched from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Pacific. But all this rapid growth, it came with a huge, deep-seated problem, a dark cloud that was hanging over everything. And it was a problem that would bring the entire country right to the brink of total collapse. I mean, with land from sea to shining sea and peace on all its borders, everything should be great, right? You'd think so. The country was massive, full of resources, and not at war. But internally, it was being ripped apart by one single, fundamental, and completely irreconcilable issue: slavery. The country was basically split into two completely different realities. You have the industrial North, where slavery was illegal, and most people saw it as a great evil. Then you had the agricultural South, where the entire economy was built on the backs of enslaved people. They were on a collision course, and something had to give. The final trigger? It came in 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was elected on a platform of stopping the expansion of slavery. That was it. The Southern states seceded, and the Civil War began. After 4 incredibly brutal years, the North won. The Union was saved, and slavery was finally abolished. But even after this devastating, soul-crushing war, that old national habit of expansion, it just kept going. It's wild. Just a few years later, the U.S. bought Alaska from Russia for literally pennies an acre. And at the same time, way out in the Pacific, American businessmen were already laying the groundwork to take control of Hawaii. Okay, so with the continent now secured from coast to coast, America's focus started to turn outward. And this is where the final accidental step was about to be taken, the leap from being a regional power to a truly global one. And the trigger, this time, was a conflict brewing in Cuba, when a U.S. warship, the USS Maine, mysteriously exploded in Havana Harbor. The U.S. declared war on Spain. The war itself was over in a flash, and when the dust settled, America had basically inherited what was left of the old Spanish Empire, suddenly finding itself in control of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. This all set the stage perfectly for the incredibly energetic President Teddy Roosevelt, who had a very clear vision for American power. First, the U.S. officially annexed Hawaii, which gave them a key naval base right in the middle of the Pacific. Next, they pushed for the construction of the Panama Canal, a massive shortcut that let the Navy move super quickly between the Atlantic and Pacific. And finally, Roosevelt built that Navy up until it was the second largest in the entire world. By 1914, America had stumbled, fought, and bought its way right onto the world stage. And that kind of brings us full circle, from being an ignored runner-up prize to a massive continental nation, and finally, a global power. The journey was anything but planned. It was a story filled with accidents, incredible luck, and so many unintended consequences, which leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. What does a nation that was born from a revolution against an empire do when it finds itself becoming an empire? That's definitely something to chew on. Thanks for watching.